Not today, yesterday, the day
Hmm.
before, but it's been a lot of snow out here. Just
Yeah,
drove my son to
you guys are
school.
getting dumped on.
Yeah, we must
Yeah,
have got 2 feet total.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot for New York for sure. Yeah.
well, thanks for hanging out. I'll turn that off. All right, so we had the recording going, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Hey, Carly. Hey, Jenny. Thanks for hanging out. So as
Hi,
a
everybody.
reminder, good morning or afternoon or afternoon. Mhm. All right, so this is technically, I think, the 6th week of the year, and the T complete practice has been broken up into 4 sections, and in each section it has 13 topics. Super loud. Okay. How about up here? Is that better, Mike?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, cool. I went from one extreme to the other, where there was like crackling sounds in the background to like extreme quality sound. That's interesting. So these are what we call the 4 corners of the practice. And so the first one is the nature of attention. And number 2 are tricks of attention. These are both principles, by the way. I don't really, the way that I name them, nature of attention and tricks of attention, that might not immediately allude to principle, but it really is. So one of the principles is just the nature of attention. In principle, you have never been removed from that. You have never been removed from your own attention unless you're in a dreamless sleep. If you're in a dreamless sleep, and yeah, we talked about comas and things like that, and there's some things we don't know for sure, but dreamless sleep, no attention, no time, you just wake up and it's like, here I am. But otherwise, even in a dream, you have a dreaming attention and you're paying attention to the dream. And then when you're in your waking day, then you're paying attention to that. Mike, I also, as I put attention on my throat, I realize I'm probably projecting my voice too much because the headphones, I don't hear as well. So that might be why it was super loud as well. I realized how much air I was just using.
What are we gonna title this video or this meeting?
This video is actually the 6th of the 13 topics of basic alignment. And that topic is, let's see, we did fox walking, and then this is 4 modes. And I'm going to go really into depth into 4 modes because we've talked about 4 modes and fox walking so many times. But now I'm going into some of the specific points of both of those practices because it will translate to later down the road as well in the warrior training, seers training, and so forth. And that's the golden line. I really expand on the golden line because that becomes super important because it's an internal point of attention. It involves energy centers in the body. I'll put energy in air quotes for now, but I can explain that.
Okay.
That sound good,
So
Shannon?
this is the
Okay.
number 5. Is that what you said?
6. I think number 6.
Okay.
We had the 4 corners. Number 5 was fox walking. And then this week we talk about 4 modes practice. And 4 modes is almost exactly the same as fox walking, only now we're adding it to the other modes of our daily activity. Although Ida added kneeling because she does gardening. So when she gardens, because I noticed this as well, when I would water my plants, I would find myself in a kneeling position. And then I realized that's actually kind of another mode. It's not quite sitting, not quite standing. It's kind of a squatting type of deal. But I don't include that in the modes of practice because that's not as common. People may not kneel their entire day, but you do lay down. You are typically in a horizontal position, and then you sit up. Now you're sitting. And then you get out of bed, and at least for a moment you're standing. And at some point you're going to stand if you're walking, and then you walk, and then other forms of movement. And so another form of movement, like Ida pointed out, could be that kneeling posture. but I didn't really include that I didn't make it the 5 modes because not everybody will do the kneeling one. So, like I didn't today because I don't have any plants right now. So, but it is still worth mentioning that it can still be other modes of movement. It's just we're taking the same fundamental element, the third pillar, paying attention to the present moment on purpose, deliberately. And that's what these points in our body are. They're not abstract ideology. So I'm not trying to just throw philosophy at you. I'm recommending that we put our attention on the throat chakra or just the throat. Put your attention in the heart space. Not trying to manipulate it, not trying to control it. We're not trying to get any result, although it will have a result, and it's called alignment. And the body will begin to flow. And that's why when I draw that picture, it has kind of a curve to it, and we're talking about fluids. That's also the human body in that analogy. Remember, a lot of times I use that between infinite and finite, and then the human body in between as the receptor between the two. It's what connects the two. Does that make sense? Okay, so I guess I was explaining for a brief moment how the nature of attention and tricks of attention are principle. In principle, we all have attention. And the more we talk about it and look at it and analyze it, the more it's the same. We're experiencing the exact same thing. There's actually no differentiation between the experience of attention, because how we perceive it, now that's the individual thing, that's the perception of the hawk, but attention itself, and that's what Eckhart Tolle would call the watcher. I think Buddha would have a different name for it, but we would be getting back to the no mind or beginner mind. Does that make sense? So everybody has attention, and that's the nature of attention. Now, tricks of attention is another principle that I call asset, active and selective sensory engagement theory. That's for the academics, institutions. I have that ready for them. So when they're like, what are you guys doing? We are actively, selectively, we're actively selecting our point of engagement in the now moment. That's what we're doing. And in principle, I would also call that free will. There's no real evolutionary purpose if gene decides to, well, no, actually there is now. We've given it an evolutionary purpose, but it didn't always have one. Looking at the color yellow, or looking for spherical objects and circles in the geometry of rooms, or wherever he goes. There's no real evolutionary purpose to do that. That's why your mind isn't doing that automatically. So, for example, if all of a sudden we're invaded by aliens that fly, and they're constantly flying through the air, and then they'll just go down and they'll just pluck human beings and take them up to the spaceship. Our evolution physically is now in danger. And by evolution, I mean change over time. The human species won't change over time if these aliens keep on plucking us and taking us up to their ships. So now all of a sudden, the sky is a huge situation. And we would start looking more like meerkats. Like we'd probably have scouts who would go outside and look at the sky to make sure that it was okay for Ida and Lisa to go to the car so that we can go to work. And then we have to have a couple scouts to get out of the car and go to work because these aliens keep plucking us down. Now, all of a sudden, our mind is giving the sky attention. That's a biological factor. That's an extreme example because that's probably not going to happen. Like we're probably not going to have an alien invasion. I said probably. I mean, probably means that it could still happen, I guess. And it would probably start in New York City because that's where it always starts. Or LA. Every now and then it's in LA.
Or China.
Or China, yeah. Hong Kong. Okay, so the first two corners of the T practice is principle. In principle, we have attention. And in principle, we decide where it goes if we want to. So can we agree on those first two cornerstones? And then we could talk about the next two, and then we can talk about the first two practices that we introduce in the T practice. Attention is not thought. right? When I say thought, I mean words, concepts, descriptions, definitions, ideas. That's a certain thing that happens in our brain, and I think it's a marvelous thing. I don't declare war on it. But attention is something, in a manner of speaking, it's different because it's the attention on those things. But attention itself is all pervasive, in a manner of speaking. Okay, so the nature of attention, we are it, and we get to decide where we go. There's some other things that go along with that we talked about over the course of the week, such as where attention goes, energy flows. And that rhymes and it sounds good, but that can actually start to be felt with the golden line. And the golden line does begin in fox walking and the 4 modes practice, and in deliberate driving, which will be the one after that. So those are 3 solid practices that a person could pick up right away that could really benefit their entire life experience. And it doesn't really involve the redirection, the rule of 3. That's the next thing. So counterbalance is where I introduce the rule of 3, 3-strike rule, redirection of cognition. So somebody doesn't have to agree to that. So they don't have to do any of that. It's not meditation or anything like that. A person can just start to apply deliberate attention in activities that they're doing already. That is mindfulness. I mean, I think most mindfulness experts would say, okay, that's what it is. You know, we're putting our attention deliberately and without necessarily creating thought streams about it. That's a mindfulness aspect as well. So we're not judging in words everything. So we have attention, we can point attention, and then we can move into the next 2 cornerstones. Because there's 4 corners to a base, so that just makes sense to have 4. So nature of attention, tricks of attention. Does anybody remember? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Golden
Yeah,
main,
what's the third one?
golden
okay.
main principle. Yeah. I learned these,
And then so you probably
so I know them now.
and so you probably got number 4. So we'll just write that down right now. So number 4 is
the act of a line.
Yep.
Woohoo!
Okay. Yep. That's awesome. So we're really moving along. And then we get into some practices here because that's all we got to talk. I mean, we really don't have much more philosophy other than that. Like, we're not really trying to sell virtues. Like, I will talk about the virtues of tea, like my own virtues, the virtues that I'm feeling in my life experience, especially in this setting, and especially if you ask, because I'm compelled to answer questions. So the landscape of my mind sometimes is indescribable, but also sometimes I can describe how I feel to the best of my ability, I guess. So the next 2 cornerstones are super important. The golden mean principle is the principle of balance. That's where the suffering is coming from. So Buddha made this famous saying that attachment is the source of suffering. Has anybody heard that? That Buddha said that attachment is the source of suffering. Seems pretty logical when you look at it. It's like, okay. Edith's heard that. I think Shane has heard that. But
Yep, I've heard that. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. But I couldn't help but notice attachment has a source. Where does the attachment come from? And that's a violation of the golden mean principle. When that is occurring, the attachment occurs and builds and gains momentum. And I don't think that there's a cap to the momentum that attachment can have, like how much attachment you can have. I don't think there's a cap. But I do know the more attached you are, then we're into Buddha saying, and the more suffering will result from it, especially if we're removed from the object of attachment. Does that make sense? That's the real key. That's how you know there's attachment. Some people are, how do I know when I'm attached? Take it away. And how do you feel? Am I attached to my phone? Take it away. How do you feel? Am I attached to my children? And I'm not saying you should or shouldn't be. This is the human experience, so I'm not going to judge you and your attachments because I have mine. And I'd appreciate it if you also don't judge mine. Like if something happened to my son, he was removed from my experience, I would be devastated to a degree that I probably can't even imagine, right? And that's my garden, and I'm okay with that. So I'll tend to that. That's mine. But the nature of attachment is because of that imbalance, the way that we think about things, the way that we behave around things. And if we continue to give it an imbalance of focus, especially unconscious focus and attention, it grows and it gains momentum. And that's some of the principles that we talk about in T, the accumulation principle of momentum. It accumulates either way, unconsciously or consciously. We're gaining momentum one direction or the other. So those are the first four corners of T. We have the golden mean principle, which is balance. And then when the mind is not resisting the present moment, if you're bored, that is an indication that you are at odds with the present moment. Does that make sense? If you're bored, if you're ever bored, you are at odds with the present moment. It's an indication. So, we talked about, well, how do we know we're attached? Remove yourself from it. How do you feel? Terrible? You're attached. And so when we get into the act of allowing, we talk about non-resistance. And so that is a mind that is not resisting the present moment. When you connect to the present moment, there is always a derivative. And I don't know if that's the right word, but there's always something to feel in the present moment if you're giving it the light of your attention without all the extra. Gene, what do you think I mean by extra? Like without all the extra, what is extra? All the thinking.
Yeah, thinking, thoughts, judging, evaluating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's typically the way that it looks, but sometimes even focusing on something too much. So if you start to focus on a person, even outside of thought, that focus can lead to an imbalance. And you will find that, oh my gosh, I'm attached to this object that I'm looking at every day. I have a connection to it. And I'm not going from one extreme to the other here. So I've already created an ego. I gotta, that's the bed that I've made. I've created that. That's a part of my spider's web. So there is going to be attachment and suffering in my experience. And that's a dynamic for now that I'm okay with. I'm not trying to go from one extreme to the other and dissolve ego, have no emotion, have no thought. I'm not interested in that. So T isn't really about that. T is more taking the modern life that people are living and applying mindfulness to everything else that you're already doing to change the quality of everything that you're doing to make it more in flow with less resistance. And when their four corners are in alignment, meaning I'll use, who can I use? I'll use Shayna as an example. So let's say Shayna has her four corners in place. Well, what does that look like? What does a four corners in place look like in someone's life? It means that very likely she is embodying the nature of attention by directing it. So those first two corners are in place. We are the nature of attention, and we step into that when we point it deliberately. And that's the first two corners almost at the same time. And then if we have these other two corners where we are observing the golden mean principle, that's where that hydrostasy bubble will come in. We're never just stagnant in that center. I don't see that. Maybe that's what they mean by perfection, but I'm just being realistic with this practice. This is a modern practice for people who are living a life experience wherever you are in the world, whatever you find interest in. So that's where T comes in. So we will have things in this island of the practical to adapt to. It just is, Lisa, you live by an ocean and nice weather, but I'm still sure that there are weather-related events that you must adapt to as a human being living in Spain, just like we do in Illinois. And obviously Michael does in New York with 2 feet of snow. So he has to adapt to that. That's something, that's not contrast. How Michael responds to that could be, though. Remember, we use that word contrast. Oh, the snow is, no, the snow is just snow. It's an atmospheric event. Like Sorry, 2 feet is a lot. I get that, but it's just snow. How you respond to that determines whether there is resistance or not. Resistance is your cognition, your viewpoint towards the snow, how you look at the snow. Do you make it into a problem, or do you have a bunch of just do energy, and then before you know it, one day is done and you have all of the sidewalks done, the driveway done, and a snowman family built because you also had fun with it? That all had to do with the direction of your cognition, not the snow itself. So in this example, in this practice, we assume that we will always have something to adapt to. So if Shayna's 4 corners are in place, she is embodying the nature of attention by directing it deliberately, intentionally. We call those tricks of attention. And so she is pointing her mind into the present moment, and that will help her observe the golden mean principle, because she will be able to feel when she is in an extreme. That can be felt. And then it's, whoa, back to the moment, back to the practice. That's what we do. It's not cognitive behavioral therapy or anything like that. Not reprogramming, and there's no hypnosis. We're not self-hypnotizing ourselves. This is something basic. It's just, where is your mind, and have you chosen to put it there? That's the power of this practice. And so if the golden mean principle is in place and she's doing her practice, then she is meeting the present moment with less resistance, and she's going to start feeling it in all of its variety, in the full spectrum. And there will be emotional derivative from that as well. So the more that we connect to the moment, we start to get emotional derivative. So let's say, out of the blue, Gene's grandkids come through the door. He's going to feel, very likely, I don't want to speak for Gene and put him in a box, but I know he loves his grandkids. So he's probably going to feel a little bit of electricity up the back of his spine, of excitement. Is that fair to say, Gene? If they just came rushing through the door with great energy and they're just fucking happy to see you, like, you're going to, first of all, you'll feel the energetic excitement of the situation. Can we agree on that? Yeah. And so that is the vibration of it. That's the connection to the vibration of everything that's occurring. The present moment, Gene is not resisting. No. And that could be an artificial situation, because the kids just came in the room. Maybe Gene was thinking some really, deep thoughts just a moment ago, but then they run in, that interrupts the cognition. The energy immediately begins to flow. Gene immediately connects to the present moment. 20 years from now, he remembers the day when the kids just came through the room and just surprised the hell out of him. And it was one of the best days of his life. He remembers it vividly. He doesn't remember what he was thinking or what was bothering him the moment before, because that didn't hold in his memory. The feeling did, the vibration did. And then Gene will have some emotional derivative. He'll probably feel happy. He'll probably feel a little bit of excitement. So those will be emotional. And by emotional, I mean biology. There will be a hormonal response in Gene's brain and body that can be felt. Does that make sense? So it'll be both energy and emotion, vibration and biology. And that's fine. That's the human experience, even when it's not necessarily what we want. It's still a part of the human experience, and that's what we have to adapt to in this hydrostasy bubble. So the 4 corners make sense, right? Any questions about that before I move forward? And then we start to get into the how, I guess. Okay. All right, so we have the 4 corners of the practice, and now we get into the how. And the how is really what sets this practice apart from everything else. And I don't want to put everything else in a box. So I haven't experienced every practice, so I'm not prepared to violate, this idea that I can see all of these different practices, because I can't. But in my experience, there are some aspects to this practice that are a little bit different, at least a little bit different. It is focused on the doing, the act of deliberate attention, the act of choosing where my attention is going in the present moment. and that's it. That's really all it is. And we talk often about the practice and how we do it, but we don't always talk about the feedback, you know, or the virtue, how it feels when we're really doing this practice. And so sometimes I think it's super appropriate to talk about those things. So in this practice, we have these things that I call, so far I've come to call them, and calling it is just organizing it, because, you know, we've been doing this group study now for, I think we're in our 5th year. I don't know, Jerry. You're my fact checker. So it's either 4 or 5 years. I can't remember. But we've been doing this practice consistently together. So some of us maybe a little bit less, but still, most of us have been doing this practice very consistently. And what is the practice? So we have the 4 corners, the nature of attention. We are attention. We have never been removed from our attention. When you're in a dream, you're paying attention to the dream. When you are not choosing the point of attention, you're still paying attention to something, even if it's your own thought, your own cognition, the words going on in your own mind. You're paying attention to that. Tricks of attention are choosing where your mind is, and now we're going to explain exactly what that means. The golden mean principle is the principle of balance, and imbalance can be felt. So we can feel if we're paying attention to the moment, not judging it, not trying to control it, not looking for a derivative. That's one of the reasons I don't often talk about the virtues, is because the virtues are they just happen. We don't have to focus on it until we feel it. When we focus on the feeling, now that virtue expands. We feel it more. Focus on peace, feel more peace. But you're focusing on the feeling, not the concept of it. That's just a little bit different. And then the act of allowing, a mind that is not in resistance. And by resistance, I mean the attention is turned in, and we're no longer connecting and paying attention to the world around us. We're resisting it, either unconsciously or on purpose. I call on purpose cherry picking, and unconsciously is just unconscious. We just call that unconsciousness, or a mind that is not deliberate. The attention is not deliberate. So now we get into the first 2 main practices, like the first 2 things that I can introduce to you that you can start doing right now. And that is number 5, fox walking. Fox walking is mindful walking, and it comes from a famous, well, I don't think it's famous actually, let me back that up. It's from the I Ching though, and that's thousands of years old. And then we have number 6, which is the one that we're talking about today, because we've talked about fox walking, and it's called the 4 modes practice. 4 modes and fox walking are pretty darn similar. But can anybody tell me anything about their fox walking practice? Is anybody doing a fox walking practice where you are deliberately paying attention to the act of walking? And in maybe ways that we have suggested, and maybe ways that you've created on your own.
Yeah, I do fox walking most every day. And a big part of it is feeling my feet on surfaces, whether it's even or uneven, whether the outside of my foot is higher than the inside of my foot, or my toe doesn't touch because it's a little bit uphill, or there's a root in the way and I can feel it under my feet. So I pay attention to what each foot contacts. I sometimes lose focus in the practice, because then I try to examine and determine what it is, and then I'm thinking about it. So it's always a little bit of a challenge to feel it, just sense it, and not dwell on it, just feel the difference in height or pressure without going too deeply into it. But that's pretty much what I do as I walk.
That makes sense. So Carly says, feeling the ground under her feet, sensing the energy going into the ground, plus defocused vision. So what we're talking about, though, is very basic. Our attention. We're choosing to place the flashlight of our attention on our feet, or on the pace that we're walking, or peripheral vision is defocused vision, or we're sensing in to our peripheral nervous system and we're feeling our hands, or maybe we're paying attention to our breath without manipulating it. Smooth breathing, whole body breathing. We don't have to, but maybe you do want to manipulate it. You know, maybe you've been having a really shitty day and you want to, you know, breathe that out a little bit, fine. You know, don't let me tell you otherwise. But if that's not necessary, then maybe we could just do some relaxed, smooth, whole body, not trying to control kind of breathing, and that's groovy too. There's a place for that. So when we say fox walking, we are placing our attention deliberately, intentionally, and willfully. It is the act of free will, placing our attention wherever the hell we want to in the now moment. We can do it right now. We can choose a point of attention in the room, and we can even keep our attention there if we want to. So I have the painting that Ida painted. Hard to point at in the camera, but there it is, right? It's in my attention in the camera. So it's behind me, but I see it in the camera, and it's still in my attention. Like I'm still sensing that it's there. Like I'm still looking over here, but a degree of my attention is still behind me. You know, I still have it in my awareness, my attention, my cognition. So that becomes a trick of attention, a point of attention, because I'm choosing to pay attention to it. If you determine in advance those points of attention, they'll have even more power because you can't hustle yourself then. So if, for example, Carly says at the beginning of the day, she's going to engage defocused vision. She's going to engage the ground through the feet. Well, when she does that throughout the day, there is no mistaking that that was deliberate because she chose it at the beginning of the day. No, there's no self-hustle there. She would be able to easily answer the question if somebody dropped out of the sky and said, "Where is your mind right now?" She'd be like, "Oh, actually, I was sensing into the golden line and the structure of my body, introspective sensory perception and extrasensory perception. I was sensing into the environment using our common five senses. Maybe she was smelling the flowers or the change of season or something like that. But she had that written down on a note card. And she knew that she was going to be doing that. And so she chose to do that. That is deliberate. That is the light of attention pointing into the present moment as an act of free will. So in my fox walking practice, there's a lot of stuff going on. And it began when I was working really at the movie theater because I was pacing back and forth in a long hallway. And even when I was helping to open other movie theaters, I found places that I could walk. And then when I was working at the restaurant with my Tai Chi teacher, I chose to walk to work 3.5 miles to do fox walking because it became a mindful practice that I could go that whole time. Now, here's an element I want to add, and it does involve cognition. So it does involve your thought, but I would have a mantra. So rather than declaring war on thought when I would find myself doing it, rather than judging it and labeling it and thinking about my thinking, which is still just thinking. And I don't want to declare war on thinking because it's a beautiful thing in the human experience that can be a powerful tool of communication, especially. Like, it's a great way to communicate. We're doing it right now using words. We're expressing ideas and concepts and emotions and feelings and connection. And we're doing all of that via the human vocal cords. And then our ability to, take in the vocal recognition, perception, and then we process that into concepts that we can relate to via memory. Essentially, it's something that we remember. Words can be a key part of working memory. You don't have to relearn each word when I speak it, which is very beneficial if we want to use language. And that's called working memory. So memory, again, that comes up. But so the idea here is that whenever I'm putting one foot in front of the other, it is a mindful act. And I do it all day, every day, no exceptions. I just do it. And if I find my mind is starting to go back towards repetitive thoughts, habitual thoughts, thoughts that aren't making me feel well, thoughts that are not solution-based, if you just find yourself complaining in your own mind all the time, like we can all agree at a certain point, maybe from the very beginning, it wasn't beneficial cognition. It's not a beneficial way or an elegant way of adapting to the world around us, complaining. You've already identified an issue, something. So there's a bunch of snow outside for Mike. That happened, homie. I mean, it happened. Snow happened. We live in a planet that water can fall in almost every single form, almost every form of matter. You know, we have fog, and then we have rain, and then we have sleet and ice, and then snow. That's cool. But when it's 2.5 feet in your driveway, the mind has the tendency to put its attention on complaining and, oh, why me? And maybe that occurred. I don't think that happened for Mike, though.
Yeah, just to clarify, I like the snow, but I do understand
Right.
that sometimes you ski on it, sometimes you sleigh on it. You know, this weekend I was on it with the kids, and sometimes it's a bunch of pain in the neck and icy and causes accidents, and it's cold today. You know, I get, you know, pipes freeze. There's stuff shit happens, right? There's two sides of the coin. It depends on how you interact with it. I hear you.
Yep. Okay, so we have the 4 corners. We have the fox walking practice. So every time that a person puts one foot in front of the other, they have the opportunity to make it a mindful, deliberate act of free will, without trying to control, without trying to manipulate, not necessarily looking for a derivative, but there will be a derivative, a relaxed mind, a healthy body. The energy begins to flow. We begin to connect to the world around us, and all of a sudden, we are paying attention to the seat of our experience, at least when we're walking. And that will still be beneficial. And then when cognition starts to come up, words start to occur, and I notice that it's not really what I want, then I can just say my mantra. In this moment, my mind can relax. I'm here to connect, pay attention, connect, pay attention. That can help redirect the mind back to the present moment. See, that's not cognitive redirection, cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's not just positive thinking. However, the thinking can get you back to paying attention to the moment on purpose. That's this practice. It could be positive. You could look at it that way. But it's also just pointing back to what I call the 3rd pillar. Active attention on the present moment happening now because you chose it. That's where you put your attention, is on your body, on your walking, on your pace, on your breath when you walk, on the sounds of nature when you walk, on the sights of nature or the city or the geometry or the feel. Now, when you start to get into the feel of things, well, you had to have relaxed your mind. The more you relax your mind, the more you're going to feel. So if your mind is relaxed because of the practice when you're walking, now you're feeling the world around you. And it starts to get a little bit tricky to explain to other people, because now we're connecting to the essence of things. We're connecting to the vibration of things. We're starting to move with the world around us and the universe around us because we're present. We showed up. We're not trying to control. We're just here. And we're here on purpose. That's okay. That's still not trying to control the world around us. It's not attempting to manipulate anything. But because the mind relaxed, because the body relaxed, all the virtues from that begin to flow. The kindness begins to flow. The compassion begins to flow. The understanding, the unhurried nature of, okay, I don't get this, but I know it'll come to me. Like, I don't have to try to understand everything. I understand the nature of my attention. I understand how to feel good. I understand how to connect to the present moment. I understand how to feel and pay attention to the feeling that I get as a result to connection. Sometimes it's not what I want, but I can still feel peace. Sometimes the pipes will burst and I'll have to just get shit done. You know, I can do that and I can still feel peace. So the entire human experience, the full spectrum of the human experience, you know, is accessible to us. And if we still feel peace, then we're not existing in an extreme, at least not for very long. So the 4 modes practice is where we take fox walking and we start to apply it to the most common modes of our daily life. I am sitting. I am doing my 4 modes practice. So Ida, oh, I'm sorry. I don't like picking on Ida, but I know she knows. So the way that I've been sitting during this presentation, is it accidental, do you think? How do you know that it's not?
because you choose to sit like that, and because you always sit like that, and because you've talked about it before, that you relax
Well,
your
dang it.
and you
That's true.
put attention on your elbows to keep them down by your side. Where else would they be? Well, stuff like that, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And like, I
That's
didn't
because
mean to
you
call
say so. Yeah.
It's because I say so. And I'm not manipulating, I'm not trying to control, but over a long period of practice, my body starts to take on a particular structure that I have intended via what I call, now I'm starting to mix practices here because it's super important, is what I call these deliberate points in the body, the golden line. The golden line is kind of a misnomer in a manner of speaking. It starts out with the feet usually, and then we start to pay attention to this energy center. I call it the Dantian because I stole it from Tai Chi. I started to do it and pay attention to that area because Tai Chi told me to, and that's okay. So I'm telling you where I got it. I started to pay attention to my chest because I have an L6, I have an extra vertebra. And I just noticed that my body, my chest kept doing this. It kept depressing. And I was like, well, that doesn't feel good to hunch like that. Like something's not right. It doesn't feel good. I'm out of physical alignment. When you're out of physical alignment, it won't feel good over time. So I just placed attention there and relax. Oh, and then immediately I just did it. I put attention on the Dantian and it came down. And then the chest is aligned. I'm not like this and I'm not like this. I'm just square, even, balanced. Right now I'm talking, so I put attention on the throat. But when I'm not talking, I typically have attention breathing into the back of the head. And I have some things that I can feel, but I don't like talking about that very much. You know, other people are starting to feel it too, so they're asking me questions, and I love arriving with Q&A as opposed to just telling you what you should feel. You can feel whatever you feel. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the human experience is we have a connection to infinite variation of feeling, of connection, of vibrancy. It's all an infinite ordeal. So there's no limits. You can feel something completely different than any human has ever felt before. In fact, you are. Chemically, it's a fact. The chemicals in Gene's body has never been replicated exactly as it is right now in any other human being. He is fundamentally unique. But attention itself is fundamentally shared with all living things and everything else. And we can feel the timelessness of attention itself. If we pay attention to that timelessness, that's actually also a different point of attention down the road. I began to pay attention to the timeless nature of attention itself. And I call it timelessness, infinity. I can feel that infinite nature of the present moment. And it feels good. It really does. It feels, strangely enough, it feels comforting. And I can pay attention to that feeling, but now we're getting into the practice down the road. We're still here at the beginning with the 4 modes. So I am sitting with deliberate points of attention. My feet are deliberate. My Dantian, or a little bit below the belly button, it's deliberate, relaxed. I'm not trying to manipulate and control it. I just want it to be there. And sometimes you do make an adjustment, and I get that. So we put attention on our chest. We make a small adjustment, and then our attention can go back to the interior and exterior. That way we're not putting too much focus on any one area. So Carly, the weighted elbows, and then, Ida mentioned the elbows. That's because there was a time in my Tai Chi training where I put way too much attention on my shoulders. It was a huge source of imbalance, and my body was in a massive amount of pain. And I was doing a practice that was supposed to be relaxing me. And I'm like, okay, this isn't working, because the more I do Tai Chi, the more I try to sit down and meditate, the less I feel good. I feel more stressed. I feel a different kind of stress now. Thanks. So I went from this stress to a different stress, and that's supposed to be better. So now I just put attention on my elbows, and I just let them go to a little bit behind me. So the elbow, if you notice, and I put Deepak on blast, his shoulder was up, like hiked up, but look at where his elbow was. The elbow is what is hiking it up. Notice where the shoulder go, elbow go, because they're the shoulder bone connected to the elbow bone, and the elbow bone connected to the hand bone. So that it's all connected. So I have attention in what I call the golden line. It also includes this point right here in my forehead. And I don't really prefer language like the third eye, because that starts to get confusing, and I don't want to get into the metaphysics of it. It's a point of attention. I am putting my mind here. No magic or anything. It is actually gets quite magical, but you can experience that on your own and then ask questions and we can talk about it. So my mind and my body is deliberate as I sit. Well, when I lay down, Shayna will come into the room and I'm laying like a mummy, because my body, I lay down deliberately. And that's a great opportunity to do belly breathing, and you're using gravity. So I love to do belly breathing when I lay down. And that's typically why I fall asleep so fast, because that's when I do my abdominal, because I'm using gravity, like it's helping me. So then I'm not using other muscles to create the abdominal breathing. Does that make sense? So even laying down, I will do some sort of mindfulness body alignment thing. And I call it the 4 modes practice. How about standing? So whenever I'm standing, I arrive with my feet parallel. Shayna said that I'm easy to spot in the grocery store because I'm the only one bouncing to check their buoyancy. And Jenny can confirm at work when they're watching the cameras, they call it the Ernie Bop. There's a name to it now, the Ernie Bop. Because when they watch the cameras and I come to a standstill at the cash register, I check my alignment. I do it almost every single time, not as a habit. If it's a habit, it loses its power. I pay attention, I check in, I align with my body, and I arrive. That's the standing. It's a standing meditation, wherever you're standing. And it can be super beneficial when you're waiting in line, because who loves to wait in line? Like, who just wakes up and they're like, oh man, I'm going to Six Flags to wait in really long lines for hours and hours and hours and hours for literally 15 minutes of ride time. That's great. Nobody really, well, very few people would probably look at it that way. So when I'm standing, a kangaroo does. They do a bounce. Is that what you mean, Carly? The kangaroo bounce? The kangaroo bop?
Yeah, it just reminded me of a kangaroo.
That
They're
makes sense.
known as pests, but we won't refer to you as a pest.
Oh, well, thanks.
Only
Kangaroos are so
joking.
cute.
I know. I
People
don't
refer-
think that. Yeah, I don't.
Well,
I
people-
don't think that.
Yeah. In the U.S., geese, well, where we are, like geese are considered pests and squirrels are considered pests. And Shayna and I will have coffee and literally just watch squirrels for an hour, or not an hour, but maybe 30 or 45 minutes.
Yeah, I do. I love squirrels. I think it's the same here with the grey squirrels. They're classed as a pest for whatever reason, but yeah.
What's the animal again?
I think it's the grey squirrel here that people say is a pest.
You
But
say
anyway,
squirrel a
thank you.
little bit differently.
Yeah,
Squirrel.
I'm a bit Englishy.
I've noticed. Lisa, what happened to the squirrels? Is it like Ireland where they just declared war on them?
I don't know. I've just never, ever seen a squirrel here. I don't know whether it's because I'm in the south and maybe it's too hot for them. I don't know. Apart from in the zoo, they have them in the zoo, which is, behind glass. But yeah, never seen a wild squirrel. Lots of frogs, no squirrels.
That's the strangest thing.
Yeah, in the zoo.
So
in the zoo. Shayna just said in the zoo. That's amazing. I know, that's what I thought when I first saw them, because in England, in the UK, I used to walk over the park and the dog used to chase them through, from tree to tree. They'd jump through the tree and the dog used to run along the ground and just chase through. But I've never seen a squirrel here, not out in the wild. And I go to a lot of nature places. I've never seen one. We see deers. We see a lot of other things. No squirrels.
So if we're allergic to squirrels, we go to Spain. If we're allergic to snakes, we go to Ireland, because they don't have snakes in Ireland. Right, Ida? We got everything in the US somewhere. Like, you're going to come across it. Whether it should be there or shouldn't be there, you will find it. Florida is just full of things that wouldn't normally be in Florida if it wasn't for people bringing it there. But it's there. Okay, so 4 modes practice, really simple. Whenever a person is sitting, they can put attention into the act of sitting deliberately on purpose. Jean could wake up and say, today I'm going to put my attention on, my elbows a little bit and some smooth breathing. That's going to be my 4 modes. So whenever he's walking, that's where his mind is. Then when he sits down, he's like, okay, I have arrived, I have sat, I'm going to pay attention to the act of sitting. And then when he gets up, he's standing and he's like, I have stood. I got to walk and start walking again, right? But that can be an act of deliberate, conscious attention and awareness, not habit, not trying to control, not trying to manipulate. Gene isn't doing this for yada, 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 yada. It's just the 3rd pillar. Where is my mind and did I put it there? Or do you even know? Of course, Gene knows. He's doing the fox walking practice. He's doing the 4 modes practice. And then maybe he's getting really groovy and he's paying attention to the transition between those. So when he wakes up, he's not just getting up instantly. Oh, were you writing that as I was about to talk about it? Hey, we arrived at the same time. Yeah, so that's what I mean. So the transitions can also be a key component of the 4 modes practice, where we can pay attention to that moment right between walking and arriving at standing still. You can get up and you're kind of, paying attention to the act of getting up. Now, all of a sudden, the flashlight of your attention, of your awareness, the spark of your consciousness is paying attention to what the body is doing in the present moment, without trying to control, without trying to manipulate, without judging. And that is this practice. Does that make sense? We all have the opportunity to do this if we want to.
I have found that for a long time, I found that transitions, the intersection of one event and another, that place where they meet, where it changes from one to the other, the inflection point, that place is filled with action as it changes from one thing to another. It's an easy place for me. It's an easy place to put my attention. It catches my attention as I change, or as anything changes from one thing, and water changes to ice, anything changes, that intersection point where it's not one thing and not the other, it's just a little of this and a little of that, has always been easy for me to find.
Yeah, Lisa, did you have something?
No, sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, that's okay. But that makes sense, Gene. So that's a good example of fox walking, and just the mindfulness of the movement and some derivative from that. So in this practice, I'm being very specific. So when you're sitting, standing, walking, or laying down, you are placing your attention into at least one of your 5 senses. Now that's going to be your P2 when we talk about it in the, I came up with an equation for this because it just helps me remember. Maybe it can help you remember. P1, point of attention, introspective. It could be bones, it could be muscles, it could be skin. I consider skin P1. Internal point of attention, or skin. That's kind of like that in between. It's the, does that make sense? P1, internal point of attention. And I can show you what I mean. So I have what I call the golden line. And so I'm going to use these little dots. And, oh no, first I'll draw the line. I've done this before. So we have the little line. And then we have the first point of attention, which is in the forehead or the back of the head, if you're breathing into the back of your head, okay? And then we have the heart or the chest. And then we have the dantian, the center. Okay? I know, it doesn't look like I've ever done this before. It's not a super... Now this is the arms. And attention into your palms, the back of your hands, the fingers. You can really light this area up with attention. Not trying to control. I also recommend alternating points of attention, having different ones. You know, we're not trying to put all of our attention in one point. We would start to violate the golden mean principle potentially if all of our attention is always in one area of our body. I add elbows and things like that, and you can too. There's not a wrong way necessarily to do this unless it becomes a habit. If in some way you don't know that you're doing it, then it loses its power. It's no longer a deliberate trick of attention. And now these are the legs. Yeah, that's not bad. And these points of attention are your feet. You can really light those up. And by light it up, I mean your attention, deliberately, intentionally, willfully on that area. And this is the golden line. Does this make sense? I know it's not really a straight line, but it does start out that way with the feet if you're standing, and then the dantian, the chest. And you could look at these, Mike, if you want to, as the chakras that come from like yoga and Indian tradition if you want to. Or you can go Chinese with the 3 dantians, the upper, the middle, and the lower dantian. Or you can do none of that and just say that it's my forehead, my chest area, my belly region. It doesn't matter. Where is your mind and did you put it there? That's the key. Does that make sense? This is the golden line. And this can be a intricate part of your internal points of attention for your fox walking and your 4 modes practice and everything else. This is not ideology or philosophy, and I'm not really using words in any fancy sort of way. Did you put your mind on right here? And I get it. Sometimes if we're not used to doing it, it can be a little bit tricky. So put your hands in front of your face and then just feel them. You can sense into your body via your peripheral nervous system. So, you know, we can talk about this biologically, what is occurring when you're perceiving your own physicality. There's a reason for that. You have nerves and it's communicating to your brain, and your brain is creating the perception of what this feels like. Cool. You can do that deliberately, intentionally, and willfully as a part of a deliberate mindfulness practice. And if you do it all the time, it's now a deliberate, embodied mindfulness practice. And the result from that will be alignment to the present moment, which allows the energy to flow, which allows creativity to flow, which you really begin to understand the nature of love as connection. And when that connection is flowing, when Gene's grandkids run into the room, he is connected. Like there is no obstruction between him and the feeling of what's occurring. And that's love. You know, we can feel that when the snow starts to fall, it's the first snowfall and it's just like super big flakes that are gentle and they're just falling. We connect to that. We feel the love. My grandpa, who was in World War II, is just a stone's throw away from the German front line. And he's looking up at the stars and he realizes that those soldiers are probably looking up at the stars wishing they were at home in a cozy fireplace with their families, that they're not that different than he was. And he felt love for an enemy that when the sun came up, he would have to try to kill or he would be killed. And that was finding love in war. And that was the name of my grandpa's little letter that he wrote. So the nature of connection, we get this feeling that I use the word love, and it doesn't depend on anything. You can find it in anything, everywhere. A single grain of sand, the sunrise, a forest on fire. There's a way that we can find connection, and it might not make us happy sometimes, but that connection, the nature of that connection can still be felt, along with peace. If there's peace, then love can just come forward. It can come forth into our experience. So can patience, so can kindness, so can compassion, so can caring for other people, wanting to do the right thing. We don't need a list of what we should and shouldn't do. If we're in alignment to the moment, we won't want to hurt other people. It doesn't serve our evolutionary purpose to kill other human beings. We're at the top of the food chain. It doesn't serve any evolutionary purpose for us to approach situations with aggression, with anger. This aggressive trait, this trying to control, it no longer serves an evolutionary purpose. Our minds have evolved, our bodies have evolved, our societies have evolved. We can actually do something completely different if just we make the choice, the conscious choice to change or go with the change, because it's changing already. That's why we call it the act of allowing. So nothing about tea is abstract ideology or wordplay. There is clear definition, because that's what words are for. It's to define something. It's to explain something. It's to convey an idea about something. That's what language is about. When we're sitting here trying to convey ideas to our own mind that already knows everything that we already know, that doesn't make any sense. At a certain point, it becomes a violation of the golden mean principle, and it will result in suffering. Suffering both psychologically and eventually physically. And the suffering can become so great, and by great I mean it can accumulate, it can gain momentum, and the suffering can help introduce suffering to other people as well. That's what you're putting out. And so, you're not doing it, you're not causing the suffering necessarily, but you're helping to create the conditions. So an example of that could be like an alcoholism. Being addicted to alcohol is an imbalance, and the body tries to create a new balance with the alcohol. And that new balance is unrecognizable to the previous one, and it can destroy the human organism. Like, we all know that. But then there's this big difference between, knowing it and doing something with it. So this practice, we know it, we have to do something with it. Our attention on the present moment, because we've chosen. And so the lines that I show you here are just points of internal attention. And you can call them something fancy if that makes you happy. So if Ida wants to call that center one, that center point, I call it the chest point. It's my chest. But maybe Ida wants to call it the glowing golden heart chakra, or the butterfly vortex. I don't know. I just made that up. You can call it whatever you want. Did you put your mind there on purpose, deliberately, intentionally? See, that's the great thing about tea, is it can start to reflect your personality. So whatever you're into, Gene's into tennis maybe these points start to become relative to tennis and improving his tennis game, and where is his body, and did he put it there, and is he wasting energy before his tennis game, because then his tennis game is going to suffer. Sparkles, perfect, Jerry. If you want to put your attention into the chest sparkle area and imagine sparkles, did you choose to do that? Is that your mind, and did you put it there? Then that's an active third pillar. Are you trying to control and manipulate? Because now that's a form of cognition. That's different. That's a different form of cognition, rather. Okay, that's easy. So we have internal points of attention that we can begin to pay attention to, and I call it the golden line. Other things that you can pay attention to, we call it P2. And I'll write this equation here for you just for fun. But resistance is divided by a point of attention 1 multiplied by a point of attention 2, and that will equal non-resistance or flow. Unobstructed energy. Just do. What? Oh, I forgot the parentheses. Yeah. Is that what you're doing, Gene? Here? Yeah. There we go. Now we have ourselves an equation. All right. So now the external point of attention, or the P2, oh boy, you could do anything. Like, there's so many things that you can do. It's just, are you using your eyes deliberately? Are you using your nose deliberately? When you're eating food or tasting things, are you deliberately, intentionally placing awareness into that? You can even get into the sixth sense, some psychologists will call it, but proprioception, the awareness of your body in space and time, or all of your senses working together to create the feeling of your own physicality in the universe. So have you ever felt pressure change in the room? So maybe somebody opens a door or a window. Have you ever felt the pressure change? Feeling the pressure change is using a lot of sensory perception. If you've ever had your ears cleaned and you can't stand up because your balance is just thrown completely off because of how your inner ear function and your hearing is connected to everything else that you're doing, It's all interconnected. All of our senses work together in actuality. But we can deliberately, intentionally, and willfully place the light of our attention where we want it to be using sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. I always forget smell because my nose doesn't work very good. Or proprioception, our body in space and time, or all of our senses working together, movement around us, all kinds of things can become an external. I'm putting external in air quotes. We're working with these concepts because this is a practice of doing, not just thinking about doing, not philosophizing about. But Ernest, there's no such thing as internal and external. Yeah, I get it. And I can actually explain that too. But this is a practice. So I have my body. I define that as internal. And everything that is not my body, I define that as external. That's it. I'm just working with that definition so that I can actually do something with my attention and communicate it to you guys. So that you're like, oh, where's he putting his attention? Oh, internal, that makes sense. External, I get it. We have communicated successfully. So external points of attention, I'm sure you guys have some, but I don't know. Do you have any examples? Carly said peripheral vision. So she's using her vision and it has this peripheral nature to it where it's defocused. You're seeing a little bit more of your 180-degree spectrum. So that's a trick of external attention. Maybe light source. Where is the light source? Paying attention to the light or the contrast of light and shadow. Maybe, I don't know. What do you like? Geometry, I don't know. I'm still naming all of mine. Isn't that? Yeah, the circle behind you. Now, if the geometry of the closet, the rectangles, and the other circles behind the circles, there we go. Lots of geometry to work with there.
Lots of circles, yeah.
Yep. And now, so Gene pays attention to the circles by seeing it. And then he chooses to keep his attention on the circles for a time. That is a deliberate act of intent and will. Personal power accumulates from that act. Does that make sense? That's the basics of this practice and what you're doing. The more we do that, Mike, the more we're paying attention to the present moment on purpose, the less we're doing what? This is our t-shirt.
Thinking
Dumb shit. Yeah. Yeah. And so even that has a definition. Repetitive, habitual, not making me feel well. Those are not functional streams of thought. Especially when it's repetitive. There's like literally no reason for me to think the same shit over and over and over. And my logical mind has already rejected that. So paying attention to your body, paying attention to your body in space and time, listening to the world around you. That does need to be a t-shirt. So Jerry, when we go to a coffee shop, where do you think some of my attention might be in a coffee shop?
Your nose.
Maybe.
Come on.
Especially if I have my drinks delivered to me. Yeah, the moment, because sometimes I can't smell other people's food and beverages. But yeah, you're right. Once I have tea in front of me or food in front. Yeah, but once it's in front of me, I can smell it. So yeah, you're right.
But when you just walk into a coffee shop, oh, that smell. Oh, you wouldn't be
If
able
it's
to
strong
smell
enough,
it.
you're right. I can. Yeah. She went to my weakest sensory perception. And I say weakest just because it was damaged physically.
I meant no harm. I wasn't thinking. I was overthinking. Okay.
I'm just kidding. It's fine. But it is a good one. I love the sounds of restaurants and you hear the clanking of the different, the tools. They're using their forks and their knives and their spoons, and it's hitting porcelain, and you hear people sipping. And so those are definitely points of attention if I go into a coffee shop. I love steam. I love watching steam, like on a cup or in someone else's cup or a bowl of soup or something like that, where you just see the steam moving and coiling, and espresso machine sounds. Heck yeah. The sound of the milk as it's going there. So I have chosen to pay attention and check in and charge those sounds with the light of my attention. Do you get how that's a deliberate act and not a habit? Because if I'm in a habit, very likely I'm going to be thinking about something and something about something else. And, you know, I got these thought bubbles all over and the world around me is happening, but I don't know. It's just working memory, a little bit of muscle memory, handing the person the money, not really paying attention to you. Have a good day. Go ahead and sit in the row. I ate the food. I didn't even realize I ate the food. Now I got to pay the bill. And I'm thinking about how I don't have money to pay the bill. And why don't I have money? Because just thinking. And then we get home and I didn't really have a great time. And it's like, I don't really want to hang out with them anymore. And I continue to think about my problems and this and that and the other thing, sit down in front of the TV and just watch TV and let my mind go into the entertainment factor. I don't know.
That actually sounded awful.
It did. That's why I stopped. Missing the entire world around us. The seat of our experience is going by unnoticed. And you'll never remember it. Jerry, what were you listening to, or what news program were you listening to and watching 7 weeks ago? Tell me about it vividly. I want to hear all about it. Now, Jerry might have an example, so I'm going to back off that one. But typically, you know, what we're thinking about and all of those thought bubbles, they're not memorable. It's not being, you know, we're not feeling the world around us. So, like I said, those grandkids come out of nowhere. That's going to be a huge surprise for Gene. It's going to be an electric, energetic, like, woo, you know, like, I'm excited about this. And then the emotion of happiness and timelessness. If he's doing his practice, that's when the timelessness will come in. That's when the loving factor never has to end and we can cherish it. And really, this is my life. It is happening right now. I am engaging it, loving it, paying attention to it. I can almost guarantee that could become a great memory, a vivid memory, a vibrant one that instantly can help us feel close to what we were feeling when that occurred. You can. Yeah, you can. But you would need deliberate and intentional points of attention to do that. So when I watch TV, I do watch the news. One of the things I love to do is look into the backgrounds. So I have some screenshots of people's books. Like if I see something on my phone, who is the last one? He had Flow, the same Flow book that I have. Oh, it was a football coach. And I was looking behind him because that's what I do with my attention, so that I can maintain a deliberate point of attention and not fall under consciousness. Go into that unconscious zone of just having, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of times they'll have the fire going behind them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fireplace going, like who they're interviewing, what you're talking about, the books behind them.
Oh,
a lot of times
yeah.
the fire going too.
Yeah, and I never look at the book they're trying to sell, though, because Deepak does that shit, too. He'll have this whole bookcase, and then there's just this one book that he happened to have written a couple weeks ago that is like perfectly placed right here next to him the entire time. I'm like, all right, Deepak, I see what you're doing, buddy. That is a subtle attempt to control. I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry, but that's an attempt to manipulate me. He's trying to take a little bit of my attention, both a part of working memory, which is non-conscious. I'm not necessarily aware of the book the whole time, but I am. It's still coming into my input. That's non-conscious. Some people used to call that subconscious, but most psychology textbooks now are calling it non-conscious. Everything that you're taking in, bits of data that your sensory perception is perceiving without you knowing it, without you really being consciously aware of it. That is really okay. It's actually essential. To some extent, that is occurring whether we like it or not. Standing up, for example, you know, our senses are aware of the pressure, even though we're not necessarily putting attention on it. If we do, that's an awesome trick of attention. Okay, does that make sense, Jerry?
Yep.
Any questions about 4 modes practice or fox walking so far? And maybe this golden line. No questions, comments, concerns?
Oh, I didn't realize I was off muted. I was just going to say, would you briefly define the golden line one more time, please?
Sure, I made this up. And the only reason I made this up was so that I could remember it. When I was walking back and forth in the hallway and eventually in the restaurant, really at the restaurant, like even at work, like every step I would take at work would be a conscious one. And I would essentially put my mind in areas of my body. And those areas were coming from Tai Chi and the things that I was doing. That's where the information was coming from. But the act of paying attention is something that I had to do. It wasn't, I couldn't just read it and now, oh, I'm enlightened. No, I read it and it's like, oh, I got to do that. I got to put attention there. And so I started to put attention in specific points without trying to control them, Jerry. And I could tell you the results of that long term, the more you do it. But as we're talking about it now, it can be a starting point to your walking practice. And you could use your palms, you can use your feet, you could use the dantian. So I guess I could label these if you want. And then I could save the board, of course. So this is, well, I guess the arrow should go the other way. This is dantian or belly. You could, I don't care what you call it. Like I said, I took this from Tai Chi because that's what I was doing. So maybe you're doing something different and you call it something different. It's not that important to me. Maybe it is to you, so that's why you call it something different. It's okay. And this is just the chest or the heart, whatever you want. Technically, it's not your heart because it's the center of your chest, and that's not where your heart is really. But chest or heart. And you don't have to put them exactly here either if you don't want to. Like there's other points of attention that you can choose. I'm just helping you outline just to help. I mean, this is my practice. This is what I do. Take it if you wanna. That's the good thing about tea is you can make it your own. Did you choose to put your mind there though? Like write it down. Don't hustle yourself. Otherwise you're not really doing this practice. And this is the forehead. I don't really call it the third eye. Is that forehead? Forehead? Yeah, maybe. And this is the palms of the hands. Palms. And then you have the feet. Easy. And this is the golden line. If you're standing, so Jerry, I have a standing meditation where it will look like a golden line. One hand over the heart, one hand over the dantian, elbows tucked, your feet parallel, not touching, but about shoulder width or hip width, excuse me, and you have all those points active. Breathing into the back of the crown. Of course, you don't have lungs back there, so you can even imagine it. Does that make sense, Jerry? The golden line.
How did the line fit into this?
Because if I'm standing, it makes a straight line.
That
Palms over the chest. Do you see that? This palm over the dantian. My feet are standing still and they're together. Do you see how that's a straight line?
I see.
And
I was
also
looking at the picture. I see.
Yeah, I know. I get it. And then so that's why I started calling it the golden line, because I can align it. And your body will align. Your physical internal structure will start to take on structural integrity or alignment. And chi, prana, life essence can begin to flow smoothly without trying to manipulate, without trying to control, without trying to do anything. It's just a product of alignment. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you said putting your attention on different spots without, I didn't hear the last part.
Well, if you're trying to control, that includes some sort of cognition, which is now violating the second pillar. So if you're doing this to open the heart chakra and feel the infinite dimensionality of the seventh level of, then now you're trying to do something. And that trying, you've actually gone into cognition, a different type of cognition that involves concepts, words, and now we could be going away from just attention itself. And that's what this practice is. This practice is just attention itself. And it can be very diverse, but we could be going away from a point of attention and into a form of cognition that we've actually spent a lot of our time in.
So that's what you meant when you said putting attention on different points without trying was the word? Without
trying to control.
Without trying to control.
Without trying to manipulate. Right. Without trying to, you're not thinking about the derivative. You're not thinking about what am I going to get from this, you know? That's not necessary. In fact, it's the opposite of what we want to be doing, which is paying attention to the present moment on purpose. The more we do that, the less we think repetitive, habitual thoughts that don't make us feel well. So we naturally reduce the unproductive cognition by increasing our attention on the present moment. That's not cognitive behavioral therapy. That's not reprogramming. That's not self-hypnosis. That's not any of those things. It's just doing what we came into this world doing. Vibrant, paying attention, processing, learning. We have working memory, muscle memory, long-term memory. We're adding to that constantly, creating constantly. So we're just really getting back to what we came into this world doing. And in some traditions, they call that the beginner mind, the original mind, the uncarved block, tabula rasa. It doesn't matter what we call it. We're just getting back into flow. We're getting out of our own way, essentially. It's not what we need to do, it's what we need to not do, essentially, but we can't not do something. So instead of just not thinking, not behaving a certain way, thou shalt not steal. Yeah, that's your little guy. That's your golden line. Perfect. So instead of thou shalt not, instead it's thou shalt pay attention to your body on purpose. Thou shalt engage the present moment in the seat of the experience because we can. And if we're not doing that, then we must be doing something else unconsciously. Conscious awareness is something that we're born doing and that we could be capable of our entire lives. But the more that our cognition starts to go inwards and we start to violate the golden mean principle, meaning that we're doing that shit all of the time, hence the monkey mind, overthinking, constantly reacting to situations with the same repetitive verbal cognition happening in your own mind, that gets super destructive. And it's not productive. Destructive and not productive. So does that make sense for the golden line, Jerry?
Yes, it does.
So right now, can you see my golden line?
Yes.
Sorry, Deepak. I'm just kidding. I'm totally joking, Jerry. I couldn't imagine it. Like I couldn't sit like this. Not with attention on the golden line. It just wouldn't. I would instantly feel that this is gonna bother me later. The more I do this.
Yeah, he didn't look well in that picture. It was
just joking.
No, I
just
know,
joking,
but he just didn't look like him.
I don't know. All right. So if you want to, just for fun, let's talk about the golden line after. Gene, did you have any questions? Or are there any questions about golden line, fox walking? You can fox walk in the forest. You can fox walk in the city. You can fox walk in an office building. Sometimes Shayna has to get up. Well, she doesn't have to. She's choosing to get up and walk around the house so that she's just not sitting, the whole day. And she's doing it mindfully, deliberately, intentionally. When I walk from the house to the car, that is a deliberate act of free will because I'm choosing to place my attention in multiple points on purpose. I could write them down at the beginning of the day and stick to them, just those, if I want to. In fact, I do. Hydrostasy is exactly that. I can write it down on a note card. Ernest, where's your mind? I'm paying attention right now to the light source. And through this, I'm using defocused vision and I can see the contrast. This looks like a shadow to me because it's the color black it's black. So I'm using this defocused vision, paying attention to the contrasts. I have my golden line active. I'm extremely present. And because I'm doing all of that, I'm not thinking repetitive habitual thoughts that don't serve me. I'm thinking communicative. I'm thinking solution-based. Ideas come to me. They flow. This study session wasn't premeditated. I had a little bit of a topic, and every time we just go into it. We let it. Don't you think group studies are a great example of this? I'm not trying to control the damn thing when we come into these or the podcasts, and we always end up with super awesome discussions. When's the last time we came to a group study and we're like, Well, I guess nobody has anything to say, so let me get out my notes and read from them. Everybody open your books to chapter 7. The History of Enlightenment, 10,000 BC.
Could you
Onyx?
just recap
Yes,
on
I'm sorry.
sorry, could you just recap on the golden mean rule? Sorry, I was
Oh, yes.
cooking.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Lisa. I was thinking the same thing. Isn't there a golden mean too? Right on.
The golden mean principle is a part of the four corners, or the four. It's what creates the foundation of the three pillars, which is presence, being present. Here I am. Mindfulness. I'm not going to create a bunch of new thought streams about it. So I am present in the grocery store, but I'm not going to judge Gene and his Doritos. I'm going to be mindful, just going to pay attention. And then I'm going to maintain that with the third pillar, with deliberate points of attention to maintain mindfulness. It's not just about being mindful sometimes. It's about embodying the nature of deliberate attention and what that can do for whatever the hell you enjoy and want to create. So the golden mean principle I stole from Socrates. Socrates came up with something that he called, yes, active means deliberate, on purpose. One of the best ways to make sure that it's active and deliberate is to choose it in advance. You don't always have to do that. You know, when you're doing this practice more, it doesn't matter what other people think, so you just know whether it's active or not. But in the beginning, write that shit down and do that. And then that's how you know whether it was active and deliberate or just abstract. So the golden mean principle I took from Socrates, where he said that too much courage could look like foolishness. Not enough courage looks like cowardice. What we want is a balance, an in-between, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a perfect blend to get exactly the right amount of courage at the right time. And that's flow, a burst of flow. Running into the building to save the baby from the fire. You didn't think about it. You didn't consider it. You didn't plan it. You didn't outline it. You didn't question it, but you just did it. Maybe you got a little bit of burnt and that doesn't feel good, but the feeling of having saved another life completely overrides that. And so you're like, fuck it, you know, that person has an opportunity now to exist more. And this burn means nothing compared to that. So even the feeling of that burn could be peace and love in that context. So the idea, though, is that, and if we look at it like ecosystems, an ecosystem will create a balance. And if there is something that changes that balance or causes an imbalance for too long, that system will break down and create a new system. But that new system could be completely unrecognizable to the other one. And for the butterflies that are now extinct, that wasn't very beneficial for them. So the human species lives on a planet, and that planet has weather and it has geological events that we must adapt to. If we don't physically adapt to the changes in our environment, we will not change over time. Does that make sense? So the principle of balance and the golden mean principle is paying attention to the present moment, paying attention to your body, paying attention to your mind, paying attention fundamentally to the direction of your own attention right now. And when you are able to do that, you become aware of your own cognition as it's happening. You become aware of your own behavior as it's happening. You become aware of the environment that you're in and how it's moving as it's moving. When you're in flow, there's almost no gap between your cognition and the present moment. We saw Tom Brady in that mode in the Super Bowl. There was no gap between his cognition and the referee's and his skill. I'm just kidding. Threw in a Tom Brady and Super Bowl too many whistles joke. Wasn't very good, but I still got it in there. I am not his fan. I don't dislike him. I don't know him. I'm not against him. I am simply not going to sign up for his fan club first. That's a fair statement. So I'm not his biggest fan. but I'm not against any human being. I don't feel those feelings for people because that doesn't benefit me. It's never benefited me to feel anger or jealousy or hate about another person. It's just a poison that's poisoning my water. And I don't do it. But I'm not his biggest fan. That's fair. I'll pass on him. Yeah. Like, I love all animals pretty much, but not all animals equally. Like, it is. But the nature of connection, you can still feel a lot of love for everything around you. See how that works? Even the ugly duckling, it's not ugly. Just got to connect to it and find its edge. Okay, so golden mean principle of balance. And Lisa, we can feel that. So balance is an individual thing. That's when devil's advocate just was like, ding, 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 wait a second. Balance is different from person to person. Yes, that's why we need to be aware of our minds and our body and our energy and everything around us as it's happening. Otherwise, you're not able to feel when you are in a balance or when you are not in a balance. Are not or are. Does that make sense, Lisa? So it is an individual affair, and that's what T can do. T, the transcendental embodiment approach, is transcendental because it gives us the opportunity to be present enough to direct our attention in the direction we want it to go. That's called conscious creation. That's called manifesting. Does that make sense, though?
Yep, I got it.
If we violate the golden mean principle, we are typically doing that unconsciously, meaning that we're not really aware of it because there's no cognitive attention of the moment happening now. We're just eating ice cream, enjoying the movie, and we've already decided, fuck it, who cares? We're just doing all of this different stuff, throwing ourselves way out of balance. We can feel that. We know it. You don't need someone else to tell you. Especially the more you're doing your practice, the more you're going to feel it, you're going to pay attention to it, and you will be able to evaluate when you are in an imbalance. And if you are, I can almost guarantee that your cognition has gone back to the trap of thinking too much, trying to control, comparing and contrasting, trying to figure it out, lost in psychological time, engaging psychological time to entertain imaginary scenarios again and again and again and again and again. You imagine yourself really sticking it to that boss all the time. And then before you know it, you're like that guy in the movie who's constantly daydreaming and he's missing the world around him. That's a violation of the golden mean principle. Let's take some of Abraham Hicks' teachings. And I can show you how, in principle, that's not a violation necessarily. But if you violate the golden mean principle with it, you will get nothing done. So it's okay for me to think I can do this, right? That's fine. I can do this. Like I can be something. What is something? I don't know. An Olympic athlete. I could be president. I can think that, and that's okay, right? It's okay to think that. Is that wrong? Would I be like, Mike, you're wrong for thinking you can do something? Does that sound like something I would say? God, I hope not.
No, absolutely not.
Right. No, Mike, you're good for thinking that. But what if Mike just sits around all day and just thinks that? Doesn't do anything else. Just sits around all day just thinking about how he should be president. Doesn't do anything else.
He's just going to kick himself in the arse all day long thinking about that, isn't he? Just that's leaking power as well as, you know.
He's violating the golden mean principle.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, ideally what it is it's taking it one step further, isn't it? It's like you say, we can be mindful, we can be present, but it's the not judging and the rest of it that comes with it, and actually keeping that active awareness as much as possible all throughout the day, as much as we can remember, if we can remember. And then just that just brings that feeling, it just brings that balance, it just all aligns up.
Yes. That's why it's the act of allowing. We don't have to control. So, for example, Jean didn't have to think, I desire my grandkids to enter the room. I desire them to be happy. I desire to connect with them and spend time with them and enjoy their presence. He didn't have to think any of that. Do you, Gene? Is that cognition required when that event occurs?
No, I just put myself in a situation where those things can happen.
You just express the desire because you're not resisting the present moment. You're in, and that could be external circumstances, and I'm not going to declare war on that, and I don't think you should either. But if you can create that all the time, if you, well, you know, create something similar to that, you know, well, now we could really start working with something. Now we're feeling really good all the time. And now we feel really great, even better in those situations when they occur. Because now we can really dig into them even more, like really connect to the present moment even more using the practice. And so what was once great can now just become something indescribable. Just, we can't even talk about how fucking awesome that was without sensationalizing. Like it can't be done. It's sensational. It felt sensational. And right now we've had those moments where any amount of talking about it feels like sensationalizing. Maybe we'll come back to it later and share it. And then that feels less like we're sensationalizing, and sensationalizing is a form of extreme. That's why it feels that way. So have you ever had something exciting happen, and the more you talk about it, the less good you feel about it? Like you end up talking about it all day, all week, you know, a week later, and you're still, how about somebody who's done that to you? And the first time you hear it, you're excited, and then you hear it again, and you hear it again, and you hear it again, and you hear it. How excited are you the 15th time, the 25th time?
I guess for me, it's the excitement continues, but it's, if it doesn't happen, or I'm still thinking cognition about what the idea is, my mind sometimes will go into the doubt thoughts. And that's when the excitement fades for me. But yeah, I mean, I can still feel excited about the idea, but it's when my mind starts to go and try to analyze and figure it out, that's when it starts to get a little not exciting anymore.
Right. And you know I can explain that. I could do a whole whiteboard about what Shana just said and why that occurs. So, you know, so Lisa asked a question about the golden mean principle. Does that make sense? And so that's how. Oh, I didn't hear you, Lisa. I'm sorry.
So I said perfectly, yes. I was just answering your question. You said, does that make sense?
Okay, cool. Awesome, thank you. And so Jenny says, or the pressure of having to keep it excited, or the pressure of trying to recreate something. You know, like we feel this feeling and like it, so now we start chasing it. We're trying to recreate the same feeling rather than this understanding and this experience eventually that there's so many variations of the same thing. Like we never have to experience the same thing twice in the same way. It can be different every time. The variety and the spice is really just how we're looking at things and where our attention is and how we're connecting with it. And that's why I said a mind that is bored is at odds with the present moment. If you're bored, then you're not really connected to the moment happening now. Because when you're connected, no boredom can exist. It's exciting in a manner, and when it's not exciting, it's still these other things that we could use, these other words that we could use. It's maybe inspirational, maybe it's loving, maybe there's, when the kids come in the room, like there's just so many words that we could probably use to describe that, and none of them would do a very good job of the feeling. But you know, we still maybe want to communicate it, so we find these words. But we don't have to worry about the pressure of recreating that, because if we're doing this practice, it's almost as if it's constantly being revealed to us. Like that flower that opens up, it just stays open the more that we're paying attention to it. It doesn't have to close. The flower closes when we take our attention off of it. Does that make sense? That's not too philosophical, is it? Okay, so now we have the 4 cornerstones of the practice, and we have 2 huge things that we can do. The third one that I was going to offer right away is deliberate driving. So when you're in the act of driving a vehicle is one of the most unconscious times for people. When people are driving a vehicle, they are using, typically they're accessing working memory. Okay, Lisa, see you. And I did put some recordings up there. So, and then tomorrow we'll do a workshop. So same time, same channel tomorrow, and I have a workshop planned, and you'll find out all about it. And this is just like when I did the night study session. I'm just trying to feel into the best way that I want to do this. So I definitely want to start to create the library. I think the library idea is awesome. I want to do that. So now I'm just kind of feeling into what feels best so that it, you know, I can maintain it. So when we get into deliberate driving, the reason that I offer that is because that is literally one of the most unconscious times for most people. They're thinking about all sorts of things. Their mind is in all of these different bubbles, but yet they still get to their destination. Like Gene could get in his car and drive somewhere, but if he's thinking about something, he didn't pay attention to the drive. But yeah, how did he get there? How did you not pay attention but still get to the location? Because he's accessing working memory. He doesn't have to relearn what the steering wheel is. He doesn't have to relearn the feeling of driving because he's accumulated that skill already. So now he can access muscle memory when he's driving, you know, just doing it. And then the whole time thinking about how the Patriots won the Super Bowl and how Tom Brady doesn't deserve number 7. And gosh, dang it, why did that guy cut me off? And don't people know how to drive? And when's the stock market going to reflect the presidency? And when is this? And when is that? And oh, I'm here. Okay, cool. Guess I'll go inside.
You can literally drive miles. You can literally drive miles and not even remember. It's really dangerous.
Mm-hmm. It is. Because the mind is not, you're not going to be able to adapt to anything because you're in an unconscious state. The mind is just habitually, repetitively focusing on your cognition. If you're not paying attention to the moment on purpose, will go back to its habits. Shayna's habit, as she just described, is going back into analyzing something like, how are we going to do this? We have a good idea. Now we're going to go off into this left field of trying to figure it out and control. And she's learning that just doesn't feel good, that, you know, I took this good idea and now it's, you know, I'm trying to manipulate it, and that's not going to feel good eventually because it's violating the golden mean principle, and that can be felt. It's not going to feel good. Just like the attachment, and when we're separated from the object of attachment, that doesn't feel good. So we know all about that. And so the 3 main practices that we have in the beginning with the T practice, fox walking, 4 modes practice, and deliberate driving. If you want to, you can throw in a deliberate beverage in there. That's one of the very first videos that I talked about in like 2017. When we first started doing this, I did it with Lyle in the living room, and it was really a funky video because I hadn't found I was still trying to do, I had all these notes and I'm trying to deliver this, and we did multiple takes and all that stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing none of that junk. Sorry, that's just not what I'm interested in. So then I just started freestyling it. I just let things flow. I let the conversation flow. I start with a general topic, but today if Ida had something that she wanted to talk, we probably would have talked about that the whole time. It's flexible. All right, so now we're starting to build on this practice of deliberate attention. And soon I'll start talking about things like the 3 pillars. And there's so many people who will send me messages and they're like, Ernest, there's no difference between presence and mindfulness. And I'm like, oh, yes, there is. Yeah, experientially, you can be very present and judge the amount of cars in McDonald's drive-through, or judge what's in and I'm giving you examples of the shit I did, you know, judge somebody else's shopping cart, judge somebody else's clothing, judge somebody else's appearance, judge what other people should or shouldn't be doing, or how they should or shouldn't be acting, or what they should or shouldn't be buying. Constantly trying to engage the minds of other people, like thinking about what other people are thinking about. That is insane to the nth degree. So most of my examples do come from personal experience. Those are the things that I was doing. So I was present, but I was not mindful. That was something a little bit different. And then when I would try to be mindful, which I define, and this is a consistent definition with a lot of the gurus and the masters, but to be present without dialoguing it necessarily, you know, unconsciously. So, and that's what I mean. Gene became present, and then he started to judge that person's clothing. Like, why is his pants like that? Like, what is he doing? What is he trying to, that's what's wrong with society. Now, where is his mind going? So he was present, but he was not mindful. And then, okay, so let's say Michael goes to the yoga class and he does the yoga. It feels good. He communes with his friends and that feels good. He hears people talk in these wonderful voices and that feels good. And he leaves the yoga studio. How do you maintain that feel good feeling? Or does the mind start to go back to all of the thinking and all of the different scenarios and all of the different, so he was present and the yoga helped him to become mindful. And then the moment he walked out, somebody cut him off, somebody hit him on the street. Now all of a sudden he's like, what the hell is that for? He's like, people nowadays. And now he's thinking about this and that and the other thing, and he's walking, and then he gets to the office and somebody's like, hey, Mike, how you doing? He's like, you know what? This motherfucker, he hit me and he didn't even apologize. And that probably happens all the time in New York, so that's probably not the best example. You're probably numb to that type of thing. But that's just a generic example of what happens if we don't engage the third pillar. So the third pillar is choosing our point of attention, tricks of attention, the nature of attention to maintain mindfulness. Does that make sense? All these masters are telling us, all the gurus, they're saying, all you need to do is maintain a mind without thought. And it's like, wow, oh, that sounds nice. Let me try to meditate. Let me try to do this and maybe you can do it for a little while and maybe it feels good. But you have 1,440 minutes in an entire day. And so your 15 minutes or your 20 minutes of this, that, and the other thing, maybe it is really beneficial and really good and, do it. But what about all that other time? Where is our mind and did we put it there? That's embodiment. That's when we start to do mindfulness and meditation all of the time. So then before you know it, we have Ida, and from the time that she wakes up, from the time that she goes to bed, she's choosing where her mind is. Even to the point where almost all the time she's aware of her body, at least her body. She never really goes too far from that point of presence. But she's not judging. She's not trying to control. She's not labeling, comparing, and contrasting. She's just using the light of her attention to shine, to pay attention. The flower opens up. She's feeling her day, feeling her life. And maybe that comes out as a creative painting. Maybe it comes out as a good idea. Maybe it comes out as a solution to something that they've been adapting to or navigating. Maybe it comes out as the right words at the right time to help another person feel a little bit better. All of these opportunities for loving connection and empathy and compassion. Maybe she gets cut off in traffic and then she just, I don't know what that person, is going through. So maybe judging them doesn't benefit me. Should they be driving like that? No. That's a dangerous way to be driving. But, me judging that person and yelling at them in the car, they can't hear it. Like it's just literally doing nothing but hurting me. So Ida redirects that. She goes back to paying attention to the drive. She continues to pay attention to the moment. So that is this practice. That's all I'm recommending, is that we shine the light of our attention on the moment. We don't necessarily have to judge, although you may have a good idea come to you. You may have a creative, loving thought come to you. That's fine. Maybe write it down if you really want to remember it. That's fine too. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But we don't have to start to focus on that thought and let that thought lead to a new thought that leads to a new thought that leads to a new thought that takes us away from what was helping us feel good in the first place, which is paying attention to the moment on purpose. Yes, Mike.
It was just a bunch of dumb shit anyway.
Well, we say that, but, somebody, the devil's advocate, would counter that. I have important things to think about. Thinking is important. I have to think this. I have to plan this. I have to control this. I have to make this happen. So the mind will start to think that way. It's trying to justify its own unconsciousness. And I think Eckhart Tolle would start to call that like ego drama and pain body and things like that. So the idea,
Right, it's
yes,
a
Mike.
slippery slope. It's a slippery slope because then we declare war on thinking, and that's a war of itself.
Yeah, because typically the way that you declare war on thinking is with thinking. Thinking about not thinking is still thinking, and that's why you can't get to sleep when you do it. Does that make sense? So let's use a mantra, and that's 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. This is boring. I'm going to go to sleep. 5 sheep. Or smooth breath. Yeah. All right. So that's the beginning of this practice, the foundation of this practice, and it does get pretty. So I'll just give you this for a second, and then we can answer any final questions and then head out. So the feeling that I feel is that I can connect to my environment from the Dantian. When I'm walking, I can let the Dantian connect to the world around me. And it's almost like it's helping pull me along. When I need strength, when I need solidity, when I need to feel personal power, I can reach into the Dantian and feel that power inside of my body, not as words, not as trying to control, a feeling of centeredness, of this is the middle of the entire universe right now because it's my point of attention. When I put attention on this golden line and it begins to flow, there is an effect, and it feels like there's this brightening of the entire cognitive experience. The mind feels lighter. Well, you're not holding yourself back. You're not resisting the present moment. You're not trying to control. So the mind starts to feel lighter. The energy begins to flow through these points in the body. The energy is now moving smoothly. And if you're paying attention to it, you can start to feel that flow. The flow of energy, the flow of vibrancy. And my shoulder kind of hurts. Like this is just a physical pain, but still the flow, like I can still feel the vibrancy. It's a little like, I'm not going to manipulate it, try to control it and try to change it. It's already changing. Just back to my practice, relaxation, everything will align. I don't have to try to change. It's already changing. Trying to change it's an oxymoron. It doesn't make any sense. It's already changing. You can just direct it. You can just point which way you're going to go, and then everything kind of flows that direction as well. Where the energy goes, this is flows. Where the attention goes, the energy flows. There we go. That rhymes and makes sense. So right now I'm sitting here, and you guys, Ida was able to name some of my points of attention. What do I feel coming from that right now? My body has no physical pain inside of it. Not really. That doesn't mean I'm in perfect health or air quotes like that. Like, I spent 30 years not eating very well. I have little holes in my brain from drugs that I was existing in an extreme to the nth degree, like the kind that will kill you. And it almost did. So, my body isn't perfect. And I'm putting that in air quotes. It is what I got. And what I have right now feels vibrant. It feels light. It feels alive, even when there's a little bit of pain. Right now there's none. And I can feel the essence of the moment flowing through me. I am it. So you know how people say we're all one, man. We're just, the whole universe is just one thing. Feel that. Like you can actually feel that when you remove all of the verbal cognition and all of the attempts to control and all of the resistance to the present moment. The more you connect to the moment, the more you feel the oneness. That can be felt. You can put attention on that feeling. And now you're paying attention to the connection and the oneness and the feeling as it happens. That's far more better, or it's far more better. That's not a great sentence. It is better. It's huge. It's important. Like
Betterer.
Yeah. Betterer, bottom line.
Much more better.
And so much more better. And so I have a little bit of attention on my throat, and that's connected to my Dantian. So that personal power comes through as a voice of power. This is the voice of power right now, because I'm not meeting the present moment with resistance. I'm just doing. This is just do energy at its finest. And typically what I say will come out reasonably easy to understand. I can take things that are very complex, in a manner of speaking, If we have too many words, it seems very complex, but then I can show you how to work with it. I can explain it in a way that is really easy to understand. And if it's easy to understand, then we can do something with it. We can remember it. And I've even organized this in threes and in fours to help keep everything very clear as we go along. Oh, wait, what am I doing? Paying attention to the moment. That's it. Okay, I can do that. Point of attention 1, point of attention 2, little smooth breathing. Here's my body. I am present. A little bit of a mantra, something like that. And then we have this voice of power, which is functional cognition, functional words. They still occur, but it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Or, oh, got it. Something like that. Does that make sense? So the practice consists initially of the 4 corners, and that will start to build the basic practice that can start to build on the 3 pillars. To be present. To be present without thinking necessarily new thought streams about it, especially unconscious thought streams about it, which is going back into habit and very likely just trying to control. But then we maintain and embody that mindfulness by maintaining deliberate and intentional points of attention in the moment as it happens. Those are called tricks of attention. I stole that from another author because that's what I use to remember it. It's about doing it, not who gets credit for shit. I don't care about that. So that's why I tell you who I got it from. Golden Mean Principle, stole that from Socrates. Just straight up, just took the name and everything. Even the example of too much courage. He's dead. Like, what does he expect? You'd think he'd want me to do that. Buddha, I don't know if he wanted me to take attachment and find the source of attachment, because that's the source of suffering, is the violation of the Golden Mean Principle. All right, any questions, comments, or concerns? It's pretty much all. Oh, so I was still kind of describing how I feel, from doing the practice, talking about that how the Dantian is that power of will and doing and get shit done factor. And then it feels like that energy is like moving through the body and the Chinese and other civilizations and cultures, they've talked about how the chi and the prana and the life force, the spirit flows through the body. I don't have to try to control that, folks. I don't have to try to manipulate it. I don't have to do any of that if I don't want to. I can just relax my mind and it all begins to align on its own. It starts to take its proper, in air quotes, proper shape. The path with least resistance is what we would call it. The most efficient energy dynamic is what we would call it. Synchronicity, the right thing happening right at the right time. It seems like a million other things could have gone wrong, but here we are. That type of situation. And so right now, I'm feeling that. And I do feel like I'm occupying a bubble of perception with light, with attention, with vibrancy. I can feel that vibrancy as it flows out. And I can do that all the time. When I'm sitting in the living room, as I sit here and do homework, I can connect to that. I can smooth breathe into it. And I can embody it. I can maintain it. I can do it all of the time. And then before you know it, I'm adapting to things. I'm learning from things. I'm improving on situations and the ways that I connect and relate to people. So in 5 years or 10 years, working at the dispensary will be another block of time for me. You guys know that I divide the evolution of this practice. I divided up into where I was working at the time. So when I worked at the movie theater, that was a section. When I worked at the restaurant, that was a section. When I went from the restaurant to teaching, that was a section. And then when I started working at the dispensary, that's a new section, because that's re-interjecting into all of these social situations where my mind is, and this isn't better. This isn't, you guys know there's no levels. That's why this is group study. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a guru. I'm not a master. I'm doing my practice though. That's it. Sorry, not sorry, but I'm doing my practice because my experience is important to me. So I'm going to pay attention to it. But fundamentally, my mind is not working in the way that other people's are. I'm not thinking the thoughts that are commonly being thought. I'm not thinking usually anything. I'm feeling, I'm connecting, I'm paying attention to things that is very difficult to describe if somebody were just to ask me, what are you doing? You're like, what are you paying attention to? But I am doing it on purpose. I have to pay attention to it. I have to put the light of my attention on the feeling of the flow of spirit, if that makes sense. It might not, and I get it. But that's what I'm feeling in my experience as a result of that. And I don't feel it for 15 minutes. And I feel it to degrees. Sometimes if I start to feel the pull of cognition, I'm not feeling it as much, but I still feel peace. So I got suspended from work, you know, and I felt a little bit unwell, a little bit not peace for a while. For a good 5 or 10 minutes, I was not well. I didn't feel good at all, but I had to adapt to that. And I think I adapted as elegantly. I mean, maybe next time something like that happens, I'll be even more elegant. You know, I don't know, but I did my practice even in that situation, and it helped me adapt to the world around me. And I'm learning again how to interact with people when my mind is vastly different. It really, I have found it even annoys people sometimes when I come into the room at 7:15 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm fucking chipper. They're like, Ernest, how are you? And I'm like somewhere between fucking amazing and fabulously awesome. Like, I don't know where, but I'm somewhere between there. And that doesn't always align with, I'm so tired and I need coffee and red. And I'm not judging, because I don't need to do that. That doesn't benefit me. But I can still feel sometimes that it's annoying if I share my mind. Some people just don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. Yeah, I can see the looks too. And some people have just completely rejected me. They're like, no, fuck that guy. And that's fine. I don't know. I can't control that. Like, I have no control over other people and what they do with their mind.
It's just
So,
that out of alignment, your energies are not the same. So you're not in alignment.
No, yeah, true. That's okay too. So I'm not going to change my vibration, you know, I'm not going to bring it down. And I don't like upper or lower or higher or anything like that. But I'm not going to go into unconsciousness to meet somebody with unconsciousness. I won't do that. And by unconsciousness, I mean not deliberately choosing to pay attention to the moment. Instead, I'll meet these situations with my practice. But I am learning how to adapt and how to communicate and how to get along with people, to some extent at least.
Yeah, I think what you're getting into when you say you're not going to change, I think sometimes individuals will get into that people-pleasing mode. And that's what you're describing is, oh, I'll change how I am so that I can please the other people.
Yes.
Or get in with the other people and be, you know, so I can, you know, be friends with them. You know?
Right. Or Gene comes in the room and he starts complaining, or he feels terrible, and I lose all my points of attention and I just entertain that. I'll start to feel how Gene feels, and we call that, in air quotes, empathy, taking on the energy of other people. That didn't actually occur. I'm thinking the same thoughts. I'm feeling the same feelings because I'm now aligning with that vibration because I'm paying attention to it. I'm connecting with it. Before you know it, I'm complaining just like Gene is complaining. And now I'm starting to feel just like Gene is feeling. And I'm thinking, if I'm not saying it, I'm thinking how Gene is thinking. And that will create a similar emotional feedback. It will be exactly. We're now in a duet of suffering. Where just a moment ago I was all right, but I got pulled back in because my mind is a leaf at the mercy of the wind. It's so easy to get pulled when you're a leaf at the mercy of the wind.
Or if you're feeling well and that person comes in and they're down and you're feeling great and you're trying to change them to be like you. I've had that happen before.
Oh, people hate that too sometimes.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
especially if they're cognizant of that. They're like, stop telling me everything is going to be all right. Like, stop telling me to think positive. They're like, I don't fucking feel positive, you know?
Yeah.
I've actually seen that recently with someone. So,
yeah. So I've actually done that before myself, and it's not beneficial at all. Yeah, I recognize it now. It's not, how am I going to change them to be like me if they're not feeling like that, you know? I mean, they have to, this is where they're at right now, and I have to accept that for now and support them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's where this practice comes in. You know, I'm going to do me. I'm going to pay attention to my points of attention, and then I don't take on, and I put that in super duper air quotes, I don't take on their energy. I don't align to their vibration. Bottom line, I'm not going to match their frequency. I don't have to. Nobody has to. But if your mind is a leaf at the mercy of the wind, you will very likely find yourself modulating to the people around you. I don't have to. Nobody, like, if every person in the room is angry, I'm not going to say anything. I'll be over probably in the corner not saying shit and feeling vibrant, amazing. However, if I was unconscious, meaning I didn't have any active points of attention, I wasn't doing my practice, I'm gonna start to rhythmically align and train to the room. And before you know it, now I'm pissed and I'm angry and I'm contributing to that. And I'm like, oh, I'm so empathetic. I just take on everybody's emotions. That's actually a derivative. You're producing it. You're not taking it on. You are now producing it. That is your responsibility. That is your output. That is your vibration. The more you do this practice, the more you can upset that setup. You'll find that nobody can change you. Nobody can change your vibration unless they're physically touching you and trying to do something to you. And even then, redirect that shit. That's called Tai Chi. Wing Chun. I felt that with phones and water bottles. What do you mean? Oh, taking on people's energy or taking on the vibrations of others? Yeah, and I can understand, but still, if the mind is deliberate, then your vibration becomes your determination. And I mean, that does require an accumulated practice, you know, so when the practice accumulates and no phones on the floor. Oh, yeah. Right. I don't care. I'm not going to get into, that's actually a really great example. I did not align to that yesterday. I just have to go get a drink 15 times. So, you know, for every action, there's a reaction. So the new rule at work is we can't have our drinks on the floor. We can't have our cell phones out, and I don't care. If the place continues to become less and less fun to work at, then I'm going to feel that, and I will probably move on and do something different. And that will be my choice, and I'll have to feel through that, you know, but I'm not going to let the energy of other people complaining affect me. No, I felt vibrant yesterday. You saw me when you came in, like, I'm good. I don't need a fucking cell phone. That's fine. It's actually probably better for all of us to have our cell phones off the floor. I don't get the drink thing. Like, I should be able to have my closed container.
Yeah,
drink,
I think when you told me that, I'm like, that sounds reasonable to me. I think people, when they have their cell phones, sometimes they can get lost in it. And,
oh, sure. Yeah. So, and I get it. But if
I was just going to mention that time at Jimmy John's when I walked up to the register and the girl was faced around, the other way from the register looking at her phone and was oblivious to my presence. So, I mean, like, she was trying to be somewhat discreet about it, but then it wasn't discreet because she was turned the other way and wasn't paying attention. So I can see how sometimes it could be a distraction. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And the bottom line is with or without a cell phone, I will feel peace. With or without my water bottle on the floor, I will feel peace because that's my job. That's my output. That's my nature of attention and connection. It has nothing to do with anybody else. That's why this is an empowerment approach, fully empowering. You have to do it. I ain't doing shit for you. I can't. I can remind you, I can point some stuff out, present what I have done, but that's it. I can't do anything for anyone. And so even at work, when, all of these emotions and all of these different things are occurring around me, I don't have to modulate to that. Now, I also don't have to be, doing cartwheels and backflips and singing songs of joy when everybody else is in a state of ice cold misery because they're freezing. I didn't complain. I don't care. It's 50 degrees in there. I fucking care. If it gets so uncomfortable, then I have a choice to make, leave or stay. But if I choose to stay, no amount of thinking and complaining in my own mind makes anything beneficial for me. So I'm not going to do it. But at the same time, Jenny, and you've seen this, I can't go around expressing how Ernest feels, because people will be like, fuck you. You know, you're on a soapbox preaching, or you're trying to take the moral high ground. It's like, oh, Ernest is a goody-goody again. So no, I don't share that stuff. But I was great all day yesterday, and most days, except for that 10 minutes when I got suspended. I was like, fuck, that sucks. I didn't like that. I also didn't like the way that guy was talking to me, but that's self-importance. That's also my issues to tend to. If I did what? Got angry about cell phones? That would be weird.
You just walked around talking about yourself and how you feel all day. That'd be weird. They didn't ask.
Yeah, why do I need to do that? Yeah, no, that's true. Although, Jerry, everybody else is doing that. That is the vast majority of expression, is people are talking about their thoughts and what makes them, how they feel. That's why they're pissed off. They're pissed off about the cell phone, so they're walking around talking about it. That's where their focus is. So they're generating more of that emotion, more of that derivative, and they're feeling more and more and more terrible. But I can't do that. So that's when we'll start to get into the four voices. It makes it worse. Yeah. That's when I get into the four voices. I will meet unconsciousness with deliberate folly. People complain about it being cold. I'll be like, yeah, it's cold. Okay. And then I kind of walk away or something, or make a joke about it or something, you know. But yeah, that's called deliberate folly.
Yeah, or until somebody just says the obvious. You know, I'm here to work, not hang out on my phone. I have no problem with this. They're paying us to work.
No, I'm not even going to say that. No, fuck that. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And they'll say yes. They're like, Ernest, how do you feel about the cell phones? I don't give a fuck. Do I prefer to have it? Probably, but I don't care. Like, I feel peace and joy and vibrancy with or without a cell phone. So I guess I don't really care. Do I have a preference? Maybe, but that preference could just because I'm used to it. So I'm okay letting that go. Mob mentality for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of that, especially, well, I won't go too much into it because these recordings are public, but yeah. Lots of that.
I know just experiences from my own work experiences that's happened. Your wherever your workplace makes some type of change, that change somehow impacts your work, and they didn't ask you about it, and they just change it. I mean, people, yeah, they group together, and then it's like war against, them. Why'd they do this? And it becomes like that wherever you work. If the mentality is something perceived as negative against them, it's bound to happen.
Either that, or you're just walking all day with your golden line and you're feeling this vibrancy and you're connecting and you're feeling good, and every now and then you have thoughts of like what you're going to write in your book, and that's my day. Like, I'm good.
Probably if that's what happened, I think employers would have, they'd be it wouldn't be as a difficult process to communicate change to the employees as much if everyone was just like, oh yeah, that makes total sense,
Right. Could you just imagine that? Like the whole place just being like, you know what? That's a good rule.
Yeah.
No, people were going off. I forgot about okay. I might be getting too specific here, but holy jeans. That's one of the rules. Like there are literally people going to war about this. They're like, I'm going to fight this. And I'm like, what? Like, what? Like, just wear jeans that don't have holes. Like, I get it. Like, it's cold outside. Like, it's negative 15 with the wind chill. Like, how are these holes in your pants serving you in the first place? And then why would we let that ruin our day? And some people literally let that, send them off into just all kinds of
Don't let anyone
cognition.
else wear holy jeans on accident, because then they're going to be in the office complaining about them wearing the holy jeans. That happened at my office where it just spiraled into something it didn't really need to be.
Yeah, that happens a lot. All right. Any questions, comments, or concerns before we get out of here? So this will be video number 6. And if you look, Hold on a second. Let me get the website up. So I'll just show you where this is at. And I don't know, maybe it could look better or not. I don't know. But this is where it's at. So if you go to, you can see this, right? My website? Okay, so if you go to video replay, this will make more sense when it's all full at the end of the year because you have 4 basic categories. All right, I even explain those categories right up here. And then you just click on basic alignment. This is in red. This is in red. Clickable. And then here are the videos so far. I have 4 of 13 finally up. That's the active allowing. And now we have 5 and 6 that I'll get up there. I might put the podcast in a separate little thing, but just like this, where I can just put the video and you can just play it really quickly. This is actually a question and answer plugin. I make the question the title of the video and I make the answer the video, but this is actually frequently asked questions. You can actually see the same thing on the main page. Do you see what I did, Gene? I took this frequently asked question thing and I just turned it into, what are you offering? This is Q&A. But I just took the Q&A and just made it the title and the video. So I'm just using what they give me. But yeah, so the podcast right now, you just join the podcast here, but I'm going to put the replays here soon because I'm going to upload those to YouTube as well. I'll have the donation one here pretty soon. So if you feel inspired to make a donation, it really will help keep things moving forward. I'm going to put in some one-on-one sessions. So if you're coming to the group study, then you can just sign up for one every now and then whenever you feel like it. Any questions or anything? So tomorrow I'm going to go into a little bit about anxiety. So I want to have a whole little workshop thing about anxiety because that's definitely one people are talking about. And the language is starting to change. Because a person can feel anxiety in the body first and is perpetuated by thought, we've actually started to identify this is the nature of imbalance and attachment and clinging. We start to identify with anxiety. And now before you know it, my anxiety is high today. Now we don't even really know what we're talking about. Now we're starting to identify with certain traits and definitions and things like that. And we're not really talking about what's actually occurring. So there can be things that trigger body response. You know, maybe it's PTSD, maybe it's something else, an ex, you know, boyfriend or girlfriend comes in and the body reacts with an anxious response. It will be perpetuated with thinking. If it continues and makes it worse, that's because we're thinking about it, we're focusing on it. So what I'll talk about tomorrow is how we can use T to interact with both of those, the bodily response and the thought. They will interact with one another. So if we start to work with the thinking and the response, then eventually there will be no anxiety. No person is necessarily, you know, there are some exceptions. We have abnormal psychology, changes in the brain and the way that the body releases hormones. But in general, most people do not have to live in an anxious state. They can change that state.
Yes, I'm living proof. Can you remind me what time tomorrow's class starts?
Same time, 7 a.m. we'll do tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'll probably do it in little segments, record each one and then do some Q&A, but I'm probably going to record tomorrow in little segments because I'm looking at that as maybe a way to do the library. I do a workshop, make a bunch of little segments, and now somebody has like a little package of segments that they can listen to, and it will deliver whole topics like T and anxiety, fox walking, deliberate modules. Yeah, to deliver a library. I like the word library. I like the word modules too. Yeah, modules that deliver a library. Not necessarily coursework. It's just learn about this group of videos and this group of videos and this group of audios, and you can maybe take something from it. All right. Well, I will see you guys tomorrow if you can make it. So tomorrow is 7 a.m. We'll talk about T and anxiety and ultimately how T can help you to dissolve the anxious state. I am also living proof. I had massive amounts of anxiety, social anxiety, body anxiety. I would wake up and start thinking about what other people are thinking. I'm in bed, like Nobody is thinking about me, but yet I would go into that cognition.
Oh God, I used to feel physically sick.
Me too.
Basis. I can't remember what it's like. I could not imagine now ever going back to that place.
Yep. And I think this could be important because right now people, Lisa, are identifying with anxiety. So now it's a condition they have. My anxiety is high today, or my anxiety is low. They're talking about it like blood pressure.
It's almost like they're attaching to it, right?
It's a form of attachment and identification that will cause further suffering. Yeah. Instead of looking at it as something we're producing. Now, it might not be your fault, in air quotes, right? It's not our fault. If Gene was in a war, or let's say he crashes a plane, and that creates a type of PTSD to where planes make him feel unwell. I get it. That bodily response, I'm not blaming Gene. Like, I'm not like, oh, Gene, that's your fault. You are creating that, though. But your body is creating the anxiety, and there's still ways to work with that. There's still things you can do with that using only the third pillar, not trying to control, not trying to change it, but are we using mantras and words and the voice of power to point back to the second ring or the third pillar? There we go. Yes, it can be based off previous experiences. So I'm not going to sit here and judge and blame Jerry because she feels, anxiety when she goes to the grocery store because one got robbed that she was in last week. And now she feels, maybe somebody was getting, well, the root cause is fundamentally thinking, but remember the tiger in the room, you didn't have to think a thought, but you're afraid, right? Now, the suffering comes in the way that we think about it, the way that society has shaped our carved block. So the root is the thinking, but that sometimes doesn't help, to point that out. And in a sense, finding peace in war. Perfect. That's a really good example. So, Jerry, the reason that I can say that the fear of the tiger, if it's perpetuated into PTSD or something like that, that doesn't necessarily have to do with thinking. It could just be it scared the shit out of you. It has everything to do with your carved block because you don't even know that tigers are scary. Maybe that tiger wasn't hungry. It was just a tiger. But you think you're supposed to be scared, and that does come from the carved block. And the carved block comes from thinking in words. So while the root will go back to thinking, if you're in a grocery store and there's a traumatic experience, that's your body responding, and it could be responding in a way that's not super elegant, and then you do create suffering, and then the thinking perpetuates that, makes it worse. Yeah, so they definitely work together. But sometimes we can have bodily reactions that originate from the experience and are perpetuated and originate with thought. Does that make sense?
Where we get into trouble, for your example, if I'm hearing you correctly, is having that same feeling and the tiger's not there.
That's the key. The tiger's,
yeah, we go out and start acting like we're still there, still in that space, and we're not.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the root cause is the lack of deliberate attention. Leaf at the mercy of the wind. Does that make sense? That's the root cause that leads to the imbalance in thinking.
Like necessarily you start practicing and that feeling just goes away. You have to remember to practice when you start to feel that feeling. Because of the practice, you notice that, oh, this causes a reaction, this type of situation I react to. Let me go to my practice. Where's my mantra? Where are my feet at? Let me be more deliberate so that I can learn to change the response to how I react to that certain item or behavior or whatever person or situation that you're in.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk about this more tomorrow in the workshop environment, and I'll make a couple little videos around topics, and we'll go from there. See how that works. All right. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Appreciate you hanging out, and I hope the sound quality is better. I'm going to upload this, and I hope it sounds good. All right, go get your shot, Gene.
Bye. Oh, awesome.
Is that your second one? Nice. Second one. Heck yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'll see you guys later. Yep, thanks for hanging out, and I'll upload this soon. Bye, everyone.